Hello. How are we doing? Welcome to this Box Elder County Data Center Forum. We really appreciate you all being here with us tonight and choosing to be here with us tonight on a Tuesday evening. You could be doing 100 other things, and you chose to come here and learn and hopefully feel empowered to take action. I'm Jake Dreyfus. I'm the Managing Director of Grow the Flow, the host for tonight's evening and your moderator. And I'll just take a second to invite our panelists up here. The way this is going to go tonight is I'm going to ask an opening question to all of our panelists and then open it up to you all. All we ask in this conversation is that we ground the conversation in respect, right? We don't want to hear any booing or cheering or anything like that. But feel free to voice your opinion, right? That's really important and part of true and good public discourse and public process. And so with that, I'll just briefly introduce our panelists here. On my left, I have Grow the Flow's Executive Director, Ben Abbott. He's also an ecologist, a professor of ecology at BYU, where he studies global rivers and lakes and hydrological systems. We have Mayor Shepard here, Mayor of Clearfield City, and also a board member of MIDA. We have Brenna Williams, one of the co-signers and leaders of the Box Elder County Accountability Referendum, a public referendum to try and overturn the decision made by Box Elder County public officials or county commissioners. And then on the far left here, we have Brigham Daniels, who is the co-director of the Wallace Stegner Center of Environmental Law at the University of Utah, and the lead of the Great Salt Lake Project, where he's working to develop policy solutions to help save Great Salt Lake. And so with that, I think I'll just start here with Ben. And I'd love to hear from you, a national and global perspective, right? How is data center development unfolding? And what are some of the opportunities and concerns you see with the rapid scale of data center development in our state, but also around the nation?
Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight. I think it is a wonderful sign of the vitality of our community that people would show up and dialogue in this way. It's an act of trust, I believe, when we show up face to face and talk. My two areas of research are water security and then energy systems. And so data centers intersect both of those. I want to ask a non-rhetorical question. What percentage of our current consumptive water use in the Great Salt Lake watershed is currently going to data centers? Right, so if you were to estimate, how much do you think that is? Who says that it is 50% or more? Who says it's 25% or more? Who says that it's 10% or more? Who says that it's 5%? Who says that it's less than 1%? So it's currently less than 1% of our consumptive water use is going to data centers. This is because many of the data centers that have been developed are using renewable energy sources. So the largest in the state is the MIDA data center in Eagle Mountain. That uses solar, and it uses a closed loop system. Now, when I heard about the Stratos project just a few months ago, I initially thought, okay, this probably falls in that same category, right, of relatively small impact on water. And then as I looked at the details of the project, the proposal to use natural gas, methane, to create the electricity for the project, that's actually where most of the water use is in these data centers, right? It's upstream. It's not cooling the servers, but it's producing the electricity. And so, I've been involved as a independent expert on several of these large mega projects. That's typically a project more than $1 billion. And one of the real issues is you often have a developer who makes a lot of claims and promises without independent vetting. And so when I looked at the claims of the project, there absolutely were some red flags where I said, all right, they're claiming to use a technology, alum cycle, a dry-cooled turbine, to produce that power, but that hasn't been scaled anywhere in the world, right? The largest plant, natural gas plant that's using that cycle is about 400 times smaller than what they're describing. So that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, right? But it's a question mark that came up. If instead they use different technologies, there have been multiple independent reports now that say this could take tens of thousands or even more than 100,000 acre feet of water a year to produce that much power. So I told Mayor Shepard at the beginning, our goal here tonight is to get as much clarity as we can, express our values, and see if we can find a good path forward, right? If the developers can deliver on some of those promises, that's a very different scenario than if they don't, right? So the concerns of using natural gas are water, number one, air quality, number two, and then there is the local thermal impact. And that's another area that I initially didn't even think about. With a normal sized facility, whether it's a power plant or a data center, usually the local thermal impact is quite limited. Now, when you start talking about multiple gigawatts, that's where you absolutely can change regional climate. And I understand that, Rob Davies, I don't know if he's here tonight. He's the physics professor from Utah State University who did the calculations and estimated how much it could impact local temperatures. And I want to say something about that estimate. Rob didn't say it was the definitive number, right? He was very open about here is a first order estimate, just saying how much energy is going into that valley, and here are the potential impacts. And he's been criticized by many, saying, oh, that is alarmist. And I actually would say the thing that's alarming to me is that we didn't have that data from the developers on the front end, right? It was their responsibility as the proponents of the project to do that atmospheric modeling and say what might the impact be on the local temperature, day and night cycle, on the local water cycle. And so we can agree or disagree with Rob's numbers. We should absolutely go down that path farther and get more rigorous estimates on the potential impacts. But I think that that data needs to be available before a commitment is made to move forward, rather than after the fact, just trying to do damage control. So I think that's what I'll say about, one final point about data centers. When a new technology emerges, in this case, artificial intelligence, many people will say, look, the demand for these kinds of technologies doubled last year. Let's assume it doubles again the next year and the year after. Right? So we get very aggressive estimates of here's how much demand is going to increase. And my colleague, Amory Lovins at Stanford and RMI, he's one of the top researchers in data centers. And what he has pointed out is data centers currently have a quadrupling of efficiency year on year. That's been maintained over about the last 5 years. That means 1 year from now, you can get the same amount of compute with a quarter of the electricity input and water consumption. And what Amory has said over and over again is the extreme urgency and pressure to build more of these data centers looks much more like an investment bubble than it does meeting an actual need. Right? And I think that we've seen people say, if you don't support data centers, well, get rid of your cell phones. And I think that's a disingenuous argument. Right? We all have data needs. Most of us heard about this event through the internet. That does require data centers. It does not require tens and hundreds of gigawatts of new compute. And in fact, there's an economic question around, does it make sense to invest very quickly? That's the path that China took. Right? They anticipated demand. They tried to build out data centers long before they were needed. And currently, it's China, so you never have really good independent data, but the estimates are that between 40 and 60% of their current data center capacity is sitting idle. It's unused. And that's again because of these increases of efficiency. So I'd love for the conversation to be about what are the trade-offs here, right? Every activity that we do, one of our ecological laws is there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Right? Every energy source has a cost. Every activity that we do has an impact. But we need to be really clear, what are the benefits? What are the costs? And most crucially, who is on each side of that equation? Right? If we're expecting a local community to absorb serious environmental consequences, there also should be major benefits to that community.
And Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you here. Thank you, Mayor Shepard, for trusting us to be part of this conversation and trusting the audience to engage in a productive dialogue. You're an insider, right, in this process. You're a board member of MIDA, and I'd love for you to speak to and give us an overview of how this project was proposed to MIDA, right, by the project developers, and how did the approval process through MIDA work? Like, what did that look like on the inside?
Sure. Well, thanks, and thanks for. It's a dangerous thing to say for me. People say, "Hey, don't go do this, Mark." but I want to. I'm actually thankful to be here and to represent. I don't represent MIDA in speaking tonight. I don't speak for the organization. I don't speak for Clearfield City, although most people think I do. But I speak for me, and I can only speak to the decision and the vote that I cast on MIDA and what I knew coming into it. There is a big misunderstanding about who MIDA is, and not just with the community, not just with this community, but statewide. And I would venture to say there's still some miscommunication or misunderstanding even at the legislative point as to what MIDA is, because when MIDA was created almost 20 years ago, it was brought by legislators that aren't necessarily there anymore. And it has evolved over the years, but it's had one single mission, and that's economic development with a military touch. It has to be military related. MIDA is approached almost daily with projects, and we want to do this and we want to do that. And I get calls on my own, and I send them over to our staff and say, hey, you deal with this. But it's a regular thing. We want to be part of MIDA. We want MIDA to create a project area here. We want to be part of this project area. We want to do something here. And we are, to say selective is an understatement. In almost 20 years that MIDA has existed, we've created 8 projects. But they are 8 very good projects. They're very successful projects. But that's all that we've created. And so when the Stratus team came to us through the state and said, hey, we'd like to do this, they came in the same way everybody else did. And we took a look at that and said, okay, first of all, does it meet our guiding principles? And our guiding principles are laid out. They're on our website, and they're very simple. Does it have a military influence? Is it an economic driver? What is the benefit to doing a project, period? And so that's what came to us, was we want to build a large data center on a massive piece of property. That's what that's really what came to us, was we want a large data. We knew it was a very large data center, but we also realized that it was 65 square miles of property. It's not 65 square miles of data center. It was a significant buffer around this. That's why it's there, is because it's in this area that can be surrounded and continue to be farmed and all of its things happening. But that's what was given to us. We want a data center. We are going to, it won't affect, we'll contribute water back to the watershed, to the Great Salt Lake. This is how we will, it's water that's not going to the Great Salt Lake now, and that's what we'll do with it. It was presented to us in a very positive way. In that process, Box Elder County held 2 meetings before we held ours, and before we held our board meeting and took our vote on it. At our board meeting, which we hold a meeting for not just once in a project, but multiple times through a project. At every one of those meetings, we have people show up, and quite often there's question after question after question. We deal with those as we developed in Deer Valley and developed the project up there with the ski resort. There were a lot of questions. I mean, when we held this project, there were none. We didn't, and I was completely shocked that at that meeting, we didn't have a massive turnout to say we're against this. And it could be that people, again, aren't following our website, that aren't looking at, maybe, but they're still following it in every other piece. And again, Box Elder had held 2 meetings already. So our assumption is that obviously this is where we're moving forward. And it was a great presentation to us. It made great sense, and economically, which is, again, the number one purpose of MIDA, is economic development with a military purpose. It made great sense. And so we cast our vote on it that night. And at that point, it was sent back to Box Elder County for their vote. But they had met on it twice. We met, we took our vote. We do 2 things. Well, we do a lot of things, but we did 2 things that day in our meeting. And I think that's part of it. MIDA is a different animal. And when I say people don't understand it, they just don't. That's not bad. We did two things that day. We approved a project area, the number one thing we do, and that's to tell a developer it's okay to start a process. So we create a project area that says this is the area that we can reclaim taxes from. And then we approved a development agreement, and that development agreement spelled out everything that that developer has to do long before they can ever turn dirt. They can't develop until they have met this. It covers things clear down to dark skies in that development agreement, and sound. It covers a lot of that. Does it cover everything that might come up? No, but that's why we go through that process. And it's just, our meeting is the first of many meetings that end up being held. There's a design review committee, there's a development committee that's put together, and on that committee always sits somebody from a local area. We have somebody from Wasatch County that sits on Deer Valley's committee up there. Somebody from each of the areas we're dealing with sits on that committee. So there's always that public input and that one representative that can go back, but it's never all we did was start the process. The difference in what happens with a city is that before a project ever comes to a city, it's all of that work is done beforehand. Well, if you're coming to me and you want to spend $500,000, I'm going to make sure you've done your phase 1, phase 2 testing on this before you start digging into the ground. We want to see that. And we're not going to start and get you anywhere near a process until those things are done. We function just almost the opposite of that. It's here's the project area, here's the development agreement that you will have to abide by. And in that development agreement is every single test you're going to have to do before we ever get to that point of an approval process. So that's where we ended up with it that day. And economically, the benefit for it was significant. And the benefit for the military was significant, both in the data itself and for Hill Air Force Base and our reserve units and our guard units. The development will come because of that. Again, very significant. So that's where we ended up.
Yeah. Thank you for that overview, Mayor Shepard. And next year, right, we have a very vocal opponent to the project, right? So we're kind of going to get to hear both sides of the story here, which is very unique, and we're lucky to be able to do that. And so Brenna, right, you are one of the co-signers of the Box Elder Accountability Referendum. You're a longtime Box Elder resident, and you sprung into action, really quickly after this county commission decision in early May. And I'd love for you to share, what really inspired you to organize against this project, what concerns you see around it as a local resident here in Box Elder, and then perhaps most importantly, how other people in this room can get involved if they are, aligned with your perspective on the project. And I think you're lapelled. You're lucky.
Hope I am. Okay. I'm just going to introduce myself for just a minute for those of you who don't know who I am. I'm a retired economist, university professor, small business owner, wife of a power plant engineer, mother and grandmother. I became involved with this on April 27th. 33 hours before that, the meeting was arranged, and I became aware of it. That was the first time I've heard of it. I went to the meeting, wanted to find out facts. Knowing what I knew a little bit about the power plant industry, I had concerns. At that point, I was very disappointed in the answers from the two MIDA representatives. They were like talking point answers. They were placating answers, and I just felt like they were putting us down and acting like we were totally stupid. I left that room feeling powerless and angry, feeling like we'd been ignored and dismissed because we weren't allowed any public comment. I hoped to feel better after the May 4th meeting. But on the way in, I told my husband that I was going to end up referenduming this. I don't know why I knew that, but I knew that. Again, there was no public comment. I felt more ignored, more dismissed, and more powerless. And it made me angry. So that night I went home and I got on Facebook, and a bunch of us mothers were on there complaining to each other. And finally, we started talking about referendum, this thing. And so the next morning at 9 o'clock, we all showed up at the county clerk's office and filed the paperwork for a referendum. A lot of things concern me. The water use is probably number one. The Great Salt Lake is already in collapse. And if you do the history and research of the other inland seas that have collapsed, there's no coming back. Is there any coming back for the Great Salt Lake? Maybe, but not if we keep acting like this. The water issue is very important. We don't even have the water right now to send water back to the Great Salt Lake and take care of our traditional daily needs. We're just not doing it. We're not sending water back. Every year the Great Salt Lake shrinks more. That's a concern. I also had some environmental concerns. I have granddaughters and a daughter with asthma. I suffer from respiratory problems. And on bad air days, it's not pleasant to be outside. And we have some of the worst air in the entire world. In fact, we just made the top 5 worst states to live in because of our air quality. So if this builds out, like they say it's going to 9 gigawatts, that makes a carbon imprint that will increase 50 to 75%. Do we want to put 50 to 75% more carbon emissions into our air when we already can't breathe during emissions, during inversions? That's a concern. And for a lot of us that do have health problems, it's a major concern. I also am concerned about the heat shield problem that Ben addressed. On average, data centers increase the temperature 6.3%, or 6.3 degrees. On Sunday, Salt Lake broke a record and we were 109 degrees. I don't know about you, but 109 degrees plus 6 degrees doesn't thrill me. So I'm very concerned about the temperature increases that could come from this. There's a lot we don't know. And a lot of the things they talked about on that April 27th meeting sounded great, sounded wonderful technology-wise. It's like unicorn technology. We know how it works with really small data centers, but 9 gigawatts is not a small data center. So what are the effects going to be? It's scary. Then I am concerned about the health concerns for the community. In a power plant or a data center, chemicals are used to help with the water that is used in the center. Okay, those chemicals are going to be released back into the water, into our aquifers. What impacts are those going to have? And the scientists have done some research, and I don't like what I'm reading. The fact is, it will be released at a different temperature than when it came in, and it'll be released full of chemicals. So they can't clean it up totally. So does that take us as Utahns from being downwinders to being downstreamers? Because I don't like the idea of being a guinea pig. Other health issues have been witnessed around other data centers, and we need to learn from that. Around data centers, people are finding that there are more respiratory problems. There are higher levels of cancer, higher levels of heart disease. There again, it doesn't sound like a picnic to me. It doesn't sound like something I want to invite into my neighborhood. Not only that, they're finding that ranchers in Texas are just reporting after 2 years of their data center being in operation that they haven't had a live birth. And they're also saying that their dairy cows are producing far less milk if they're producing at all. Okay, if it's affecting our livestock that way, how's it affecting our wildlife? How's it affecting us? There again, studies need to be done. We need more information. Then there's the frequency issue. And this hasn't been studied that much, but it has been studied a little. We know that frequencies are collapsing our beehives. Our bees are in collapse. Hives are collapsing everywhere. And we need our bees to pollinate our food. 1/3 of our food comes from pollinators. It also confuses birds, and this isn't a migratory flyway. So if we don't know, we live in the world's largest bird refuge. It's important to ecosystems across the hemisphere. flying from Central America to Canada every year, twice a year. We already have millions of birds dying. If you go to the Great Salt Lake and see the lake bed, there are thousands of birds dead. What's going to happen when we have frequencies, we have lights, we have noise, we have all these things? Can the birds handle it? Will they be confused? We don't know. And if we knock out several species, are we going to knock out ecosystems from Central America to Canada? There again, we don't know. I also have major problems with, and as an economist, I probably spent more time on this than most, with the risks that the citizens of the area are going to have to take on. The developers can go away, the investors can go away. It's not really going to affect them, not life-wise, but it is going to affect us. We're taking all the risks for concessions that never should have been given. Last year, we had a property income tax increase. And I know of many people who almost lost their homes over that. It averaged about $500 a year per home. A lot of people in the valley are fixed income people. So now we're going to look at higher property taxes because somebody's going to have to pay for the infrastructure that is going to have to go out there. And we already don't have the infrastructure to support what we already have living here. Our schools are at 109, 136% of capacity. We just don't have it. And we don't have the money in to build out the infrastructure we need, let alone the infrastructure needed for this additional people and this additional project. Then you look at the energy tax increases, and they talk about giving us energy back. Well, we're giving them a decrease of 92%. I don't think they're going to be giving us that decrease back when they sell energy back to us. So we get to pay that nice little tax twice. And if we wanted not to pay personal property taxes, I don't think we would succeed very well. In fact, we'd be losing our homes. Another problem I have is transparency, and this was another major one. From our viewpoint, this was done in backroom deals and secrecy. We haven't seen any economic impact studies. We haven't seen any water use studies. We haven't seen any environmental impact studies. Are those studies going to be done? And if they are done, are we going to see them? And are they going to be done by independent third parties? There again, I don't know. But they need to be done before anything happens. Data centers notoriously are known for overpromising and under-delivering. That is a historical fact. So simply put, I see this project as an existential threat to our desert community. Now, where are we now? After our application for referendum was denied, we appealed it. Right now, we are waiting for the answer from the county, and that should come in sometime this week. At that point, we will continue our legal process. The one thing they have done by drawing this out like they have is they've given us a lot more time to get organized, a lot more time to educate and grow, and a lot more time to have more events and grow stronger as a unit. If you guys want to get involved, you can go to stopstratus.org and volunteer or donate. But the main things you can do are keep active. Keep active on our website. Sign up for our newsletter. Pay attention to our socials. Keep the conversation going. One thing we've learned is that public skepticism is growing, and it grows louder and stronger every day. Attend events and volunteer for our parades. All of those things are available to you. Pay attention to the water right petitions. Pay attention to what's happening with the EPA. Pay attention to laws, bills that are coming before the legislature. Write to your elected officials and keep the pressure on. Protect yourself, protect your environment, and protect your community. Research the candidates that are up for election and vote. Make sure you vote. It is your obligation. And above all else, right now, Remember that data centers are always on the ballot.
Thank you, Brenna. And most. And we'll end here with a question for you, Brig, as our legal and policy expert on this panel. I'd love for you to give us an overview or an assessment of the different kind of legal and policy dimensions of this project, and different opportunities to engage in that legal process. Right? We heard Brenna refer to this referendum process, but I know there's a few other things kind of underway or in process as well. If you could kind of just give the audience an overview of what's going on there.
And I appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate the other panelists. The law in this particular circle, I think one of the things that I think is interesting is I have to say I'm a little skeptical about the state and the county at the outset. I think there is quite a bit of evidence from the grandma requests that are online that meetings were happening behind closed doors. A lot of conversations were happening, and then the public actually got to know about it. I think one of the reasons that folks did not attend your meeting with MIDA is because they just didn't know about it. If you look back at the internet, and I've done some deep searches, the very first place for this, and I'm just a little shocked that none of us caught it, was, I spend a lot of time on the Shark Tank blog, but that's where they announced, that's the first announcement I saw for the project. We shouldn't be scooped by the Shark Tank blog. I think that we can do better than that. A couple of other things to note, at least in my listening of the meeting that happened with MIDA, and there's only an audio recording that I can find. I couldn't find a video recording, but in the audio recording that I listened to, the story that I heard was more along the lines of the state saw this as a strategic investment and then decided to narrow down the candidates, picked O'Leary because O'Leary brought a lot to the table. That's very different than the conversation that we've been having, that O'Leary came here and put a bunch of pressure on us. I think that's the dialogue that's in the public. But I think the thing that is interesting to me from a legal perspective is, why on earth was the state courting O'Leary before it even told its own residents what it was going to do? So from a legal perspective and the legal transparency issues, there were a lot of issues that I think weren't necessarily, there's probably some violations of the Open Meeting Act by Box Elder County. I don't think that's true of MIDA. But I do think that the interesting thing here is one of the things that's been villainized in a lot of this discussion, and we saw this with the governor's reaction up front, that we're not going to study things to death. The advantage of studying things is you can answer questions like the ones that Brenna just asked. What is going to happen to our lungs? What is going to happen to our birds? What is going to happen to our homes? And I think one of the problems of front-loading the decision and then back-loading the analysis is that the communities has no idea what it's signing up for. I think that as far as building trust goes, a lot can be done to build trust by providing people both information up front, opportunities to comment, and cutting them in the deal instead of cutting them out of the conversation. From a legal perspective, the things that I have seen happen, there are two different lawsuits. One that is focused on Box Elder County, and that one seems to be the most active. And in that lawsuit, basically what is at issue is whether or not the county should be able to bring a referendum on the decisions made by the county. It's interesting to me that the county decided that this was an administrative issue that really didn't have general applicability, and then a few weeks later, a county commissioner, after having lost his primary, blamed this on this decision. If there isn't general applicability in a decision that caused a county official to actually lose their election because of a decision. I don't know what other evidence we need that this is a matter of general applicability. I think the size of this room and the interest in this room is also evidence of that general applicability. Whether or not, we have not seen what the county is going to do. We have not seen if they're going to answer and fight this thing. I assume that they will. But a lot of this is going to center around whether or not the decisions were those that were of matters of general applicability, or policy decisions, hard decisions where they are weighing issues. That's really what that litigation is going to be about. The thing I think that people in this room need to know is that they need to watch that litigation closely enough that in the event that Brenna and the other litigants win, the clock starts ticking and you've got to start collecting signatures. So people need to be eyes up and watching because that's when the clock will start. As far as the other, there are some concerns about MIDA more generally, and issues of separation of powers and whether or not the extent to which legislators should play a role in appointing board members and whether board members who are legislators are valid. And I think that those kinds of conversations are going to probably see some legal action as well. Those ones don't seem to be cooking as much. And I think the real test will probably be made at the county level. I think that what is going to be interesting to watch is whether or not the county either concedes or loses that lawsuit. And, if there is a referendum, I was shocked as I watched the election results come in on election night. If there was any reason to doubt that people actually cared about this issue and felt that they were not listened to and affected negatively, I think that election night is ground zero for that feeling anyway. So that's a general overview of what I'm seeing, Jake.
Thank you, Brig. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys in just a few minutes. But I did spend some time today reviewing all the questions, your thoughts, your opinions that all of you who RSVP'd took the time to submit. And so I figured I would try to synthesize those down and ask just a few more guiding questions to our panelists here. And on a high level, there was a theme of pursuing alternative energy sources. Right? Why are we choosing to power this thing with a steam-powered natural gas plant instead of? Wow, must not like me, huh? And then there's also a lot of questions of what is the data center serving? What are the benefits to the community here in Box Elder? Opportunities for action and ways to get engaged, right? If you're in this room as an opponent to the project, and I think Brenna and Brig give us a good overview of how to do that. And then a lot of questions about process, right? Where did the environmental impact studies come in? What are those impacts? And so I'd love for, and Ben, you sort of spoke to those, but Mayor Shepard, I'd love for you to speak to this public process piece, right? I think there was a lot of frustration from local residents about how they could be involved, how they could get engaged, how their voices would be heard. And then at the same time, right, we saw people like Kevin O'Leary calling local residents and Utahns paid protesters, right? As a public servant, I imagine that didn't sit quite right with you. And so I'd love for you to speak to this component of public process, and if you could turn back the clock, what maybe would you have changed in that process?
And that's the toughest question I think it could have been answered is what would I change? Yeah. Because I don't know that, based on everything that MIDA has done historically, I don't know that our process changes. Mm-hmm. It's, again, while it may not be typical, I run a city. And so I am all about transparency. I'm all about hearing from the public. And that's how we run things. And so I fully support the referendum process. If we'll run this thing through, if that's what's decided, I fully support that. We need to let that run its course. That's what we do. It's crucial to me that we have that kind of transparency. We have that kind of thing. Again, when a project is brought to us and on the board, it's been vetted by staff. It's gone through that whole process. They've looked at the benefits. They've met with the landowners. In this case, the people that showed up to our board meeting were all of the property owners. They didn't speak, but that was who was at the meeting, were all of the property owners. MIDA doesn't own property. We're not buying the land. It's not what we do. MIDA's the municipality, almost you could call it. I mean, we're that overseeing piece. Once that project area is there, we're there to collect the taxes and distribute the taxes. And to make sure that things happen the way that they are promised that they will happen. We're there to make sure that everything that is told to us that will be, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and we have the ability to hold them accountable for that, because until they reach that point, until all of those tests are done and come back to the satisfaction of not just the board, but the development committee that is put together, nothing moves forward. And so I don't know that I'd change that process. It has worked, and MIDA goes back, and I've been with MIDA for 12 years now, but was on the city council when MIDA was formed. And so in my 19 years with Clearfield, I've been involved with MIDA since the beginning. The one thing that I hear everywhere we go, every time I travel with the Air Force to defense community conferences, it's how on earth did you do what you've done with Falcon Hill? How did you take an enhanced use lease and create what you've created and what's still coming? How did you use that with Northrop Grumman to bring in 5,000 plus jobs? Now we just broke ground today on building 6 with Northrop Grumman. That's another massive 6-story building that's bringing jobs and more to the area. But it's how did you do that? We want to do that with our enhanced use lease. We have one surrounding our base. We'd like to do the same thing. And it wouldn't have happened without MIDA. It's why it was created, was in that case, one development covering 2 counties, because it's Hill Air Force Base, and that 550,000 or 550 acres covers 2 different counties. There had to be an overarching authority to be able to do that. Somebody had to be able to collect property taxes in that for both counties. Yep. That became MIDA. We followed all of those processes, and environmental concerns are crucial to what we do. I mean, we do our very best to be good stewards of land, good stewards of property taxes, good stewards of the people of Utah. We live here. You know, people ask, how on earth would you do that, Mark? How did you make that decision? Well, I live here. I don't live in Box Elder County. I'm not going to say that I live next to where the data center is going to be, but it's not the first data center that we've done. The NSA building was the first data center that MIDA oversaw. Our process has worked very, very well up until now. But again, nobody asks about MIDA until we're there. And now we're here, and you must be evil. The economic development that we've done is always done with the public in mind, and with the land in mind. When the development in Deer Valley started to go, and this is a massive development, and our military piece of that is, the initial military piece of that is 100 rooms that are dedicated to the military to be able to use at the Grand Hyatt at airman rates. And so in a time where it's $900 to rent a room at a ski in, ski out Grand Hyatt resort, it was $200 for an airman to come up and spend and do that. But there are multiple benefits there, and in that comes multiple benefits back to Hill Air Force Base and the military, the mental welfare of the base itself. But as they started to develop that project, they came across environmental issues. It was an old mine. It's built on the Mayflower mine, and while the understanding was that everything had been cleaned up prior to that point, we found that it wasn't. And the developer spent well over $20 million to clean it up. Of their money. That wasn't money that came from MIDA. That was their money to clean up an issue. We work hand in hand with the developers to make sure that things work the way they're supposed to work, but more importantly, that they follow the things that they say they're going to follow. And so we live on a basis of trust. And then to me, it's transparency. It's our process is what it is, and our process has worked with every other development that we've done. Do I want more transparency? Yes, I do. And that's why, again, I support the referendum process. I think if it goes through and that's what happens, then we need to follow it. We need to listen, and we need to listen to the residents. Again, all of our testing and the things that we're worried about are part of that process as it goes along, and we've seen that. And we've seen it in other projects. And because of that, we've known that it works. And so that's why as I was asked to cast a vote, and I don't speak for MIDA staff, and I'll speak for MIDA as a whole, but I speak for mine. And when I looked at the information I'm given, MIDA is an economic development group. That's what we do. We work hand in hand with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and we create projects that benefit our military members. This does, and that's the ultimate guideline that we had to look at as far as a project area. Does this work? Does it work as a project? Again, we haven't answered the environmentals yet. We haven't gotten there. But does it work as a project? And if it's successful, does it generate what it's supposed to for Box Elder? And what does it generate for the state? And does it generate it, most importantly, on our end for the military? And yes, it does.
Thank you. And yeah, to this environmental questions, right? I think that's another concern that was voiced by many of you in your responses to the RSVP form. Brig, as our legal expert on the panel, I'd love for you maybe in 30 seconds, or a minute, so we can turn it over to the audience. Just speak to what that process does look like from a legal perspective, from air quality permitting, water availability assessments, all that sort of thing.
A lot of this will depend on what the project actually is. If we end up pursuing the project as it was laid out in sort of the bullet point memorandum, 9 gigawatts, big data center, and this is going to be natural gas fired, we're going to see an air quality permit, and they're going to have to go through the Department of Air Quality, the Department of Environment, the Division of Air Quality at the Department of Environmental Quality. There will be mandated periods of public comment and a lot of opportunities to participate there. If there is a water pollution problem, which I think there probably will be, you'll have to go through the Division of, well, again, the Department of Environmental Quality. There's a water division, and then we have, in addition to that, water rights issues, and that's going to be through the state engineer and the Division of Water Rights in the Department of Natural Resources. If there is effect on, Great Salt Lake, there may be additional kinds of permits that are going to be needed. I think one of the things that's hard about this is we haven't actually been told exactly what we're going to be seeing. What we've been told is here is a kind of abstract pencil sketch of what it might look like, and we're having to move forward. I do find it really quite hopeful, Mary, that you would be supportive of the referendum. I think that could make a really meaningful difference if MIDA was to take that position, because I can understand Box Elder County may not have wanted to hear its residents, but if that's a value that that MIDA has, you still have the ability to pivot there.
Well, again, I speak on my end, so that's
For sure.
I'm about transparency. I have to. I'm an elected official. I expect to hear from my residents. I hold public hearings, and I expect them to show up. And in fact, when we hold a budget hearing in my city and nobody shows up, and we're raising property taxes even slightly, and nobody shows up, I get concerned. And I want to hear from my residents. I want to know what they think. And so if the referendum process moves forward, then we support that, and we certainly will respect that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for giving that framework and background. And I'm just going to turn it over to all you in this room tonight, and just ask that you project your voice a little bit so folks can hear us. I saw that white shirt right there, hand shoot up right away, so I'll turn it over to you.
May I ask a question?
Please.
I'd like to ask you, Mayor Mark Shepard, you spoke earlier about a development agreement. Where is that published? Where would maybe we look at that?
I don't know that I need to Now, hopefully my Shakespearean acting training would be, but at least let me project far enough. It's on MIDA's website. All of our documents are always on MIDA's website. And so
I have looked at that website, and I've looked at many of the disclosure statements filed by my members. I don't remember reading yours, Mayor Shepard, but most of those members, when they filled out their section on conflict of interest, they were very poorly filled out.
I can't speak to that. I don't.
So I am going to go look at yours, and I'm also going to go look for this development agreement, because I did not find that on the center, but that was about a month ago when I looked. So I will look again.
Sure.
And if I can't find it, who may I contact?
You can reach out. I'm happy to point you in the right
Okay,
direction.
great,
So.
appreciate that. Because that's very important for us to look at it and to take your lead, Brenna, right? Is we should be able to look at that, and Mr. Dreyfus told us about the process that should be gone through, whether it's the quality requirements or the other requirements. And so we all have an opportunity to look at that and provide some feedback and critique.
Sure.
Thank you.
Related to that, I emailed you a public trust pledge asking you to voluntarily pledge you would not profit from this, you or your immediate family, and you never returned that. So then I sent one certified mail the end of June, and that has still not been returned. Are you willing to pledge to the public that you and your immediate family are not going to profit privately from the approval?
100%.
Okay, great. I have a pledge right here. Would you be willing to sign it? Yeah. Right here. Sure. Thank you.
I have no problem with that.
Excellent. I love that.
It's interesting, and just real quick, as mayors, as council members, we sit on multiple boards. Every one of those boards, when I sit on our fire district board, there's a stipend that goes with sitting on a fire district board because I'm committing time and effort to that board. When I sit on the mosquito abatement board, when I sit on Wasatch Integrated board, every one of those comes with some sort of stipend. A lot of my colleagues will take and use those on their own. They sit on every one of those boards, and I choose not to, one, because I want to get my council experience. And to me, it's a weird thing to look at that way. The one board that does not provide a stipend at all that I sit on is MIDA. I receive absolutely nothing from MIDA. It's my time I'm giving up, which I don't get paid as a mayor. I mean, I get a stipend as a mayor.
Yeah,
It's not a full-time job, and so.
it's the $1 billion plus contracts associated with the MIDA approval that I'm concerned about property from.
Sure, but we don't, one, that would be a major conflict of interest, and I would agree wholeheartedly if that were ever the case. But that's not, I can speak on my end, I'll sign that thing every day. And
I love that. Thank you. I was surprised it hadn't been returned yet, so I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Yeah, let's go with you in the back.
Question for you, Mark. So, born and raised in Davis County my whole life, you're a popular guy tonight. I've seen Hillary, our first base, go from what it was to the juggernaut it is today. And I, as a Davis County resident, am grateful for that, right? High-paying jobs, lots of high-paying jobs that friends and family and everybody has benefited from. I think my concern with this, and a lot of other people's concern, is okay, there's going to be data centers, there's going to be construction jobs, there's going to be, some decent amount of tech jobs up there, but nothing like Falcon Hill and the tax base that gives us and the wealth that it has brought to the Weaver counties. I think that's kind of one of my bigger issues with it is, it doesn't seem like it's going to support as many jobs as something like the Falcon Hill, and create that many high-paying jobs with raised property values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I guess if you could go back in time, politicians don't like hypotheticals, would you have reservations today, and would you put any other stipulations on the Stratus development?
I think that's probably the question I get asked more than any, is if I could go back in time, what would I do different? I have yet in 19 years as an elected official backtrack on anything I've done. Because I truly believe I take the best information I can, the best everything that I've got before I cast a vote. I can't second guess that. We're not there yet. I can't look to say, well, wow, there's going to be a whole lot wrong or there's going to be a whole lot right. Will this create jobs? Yes, I'm 100% sure it will create jobs. How many jobs this will long-term create? I have what was given to us as what they anticipate. Yes, the jobs to build it and then the jobs that long-term come to run a data center. I've seen how many jobs are out at MIDA. I've seen how many jobs are out at NSA. I know what they're using to run theirs. If this became, and again, it's even the development agreement calls for phases. If this reached its pinnacle, yes, there's a lot more jobs that are working at NSA, and there's a lot more jobs that are working at MIDA because it's a significantly larger facility. I can tell you from a real estate standpoint, personally, what business does to other business and that one business attracts others. And it's really hard to say that something in the middle of 65 square miles of vacant land, what that will bring long-term. Am I confident it does? Yes, from a real estate standpoint, I truly believe that development drives development. And the last thing I think that we end up seeing is one building sitting in the middle of 65 acres or 65 square miles of property. As roads are built to it, roads create opportunity.
And just one quick follow-up. Can we guarantee transparency for MIDA on the water issues, the job, how do we guarantee you will get us that information if this thing progresses?
Well, because we have, I mean, just plain and simple, we have to follow the exact same laws that a municipality does in our processes. And so we do the same things. And so that information, again, everything that has to do with any project that we do is on our website. It is available to see it, and if you can't find it, we'll guide you to where it is. But it is there, and yes, we have to.
But mine is not elected like a city council is.
And let's just keep it to our questions here. Yeah, the black hat.
Okay, thanks. I feel like I have maybe a unique perspective. I've been spending the last 5 months walking the area around the north end of the Great Salt Lake. I'm an artist, a full-time artist. I also have a background in public health. I have a master's degree in public health. I started my art project concerned about the Great Salt Lake before anybody knew about the Stratus Data Center. I've walked hundreds of miles of that landscape, trying to tell a story of the reality of it, the beauty of it, but also that it's a landscape that is in collapse. There's so much loss that you can already see. There's literally 10,000 years of human activity that's evident. Every time I go out there, I find evidence of human activity out there. And now it's a landscape that you can tell is just trying to hold on. And what it's holding on to is exactly these two valleys where the data center is going in. And the way that you're talking about it, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I respect you for being here and being willing to talk to us. But I do have a hard time with the way you're talking about this data center as if it's an island, because it will affect these entire valleys, not just the heat, but the springs. And what I would say is that this isn't a landscape that appeals to a lot of people because it is harsh, but it's a landscape that is holding on to so much life still, but just barely. I've found native fish out there, least chub. I've seen snowy pulvers in both of those valleys. I've seen pronghorn and coyote and wildcats and badger. It's a living area still, and people, I've heard a lot of, including the county commissioners, talk about it as if it's just an empty field of 65 miles of nothing. And it's not, that's not the case. And that 65-mile area, it's not all going to be data center. It will all be affected, plus it's not an island. And there are so many springs. So the north end of the Great Salt Lake, for people who don't know, is basically a dead lake. It's not thriving anymore. We've cut it off, it's too saline. But there are hundreds of springs along the north end of the Great Salt Lake. I haven't seen any environmental studies, but those are the areas that are keeping life alive out there. And that's exactly what the data centers are tapping into. Not feeding back into the springs, and they're fragile. And so, first of all, I think that it's frustrating to see a huge project like this move forward without the initial environmental studies being done. Second, as a citizen, I feel like we've been overlooked, and the reason why maybe people aren't attending these MIDA meetings as an artist who sells publicly, that means it's a public issue, it's a marketing issue. It's not that people don't care. So last thing that I'll say is that I thought a lot about this Nietzsche quote when I spend my time out on this land. And it's this idea that, you know, somebody who steps on a cockroach is a hero, but somebody who steps on a butterfly is a villain. And for some reason, people think this landscape is a cockroach. It's not. It's a butterfly.
Thank you for that.
I'd like to say, thank you, first of all, as, again, our process starts early in this is what we are, and then goes on to testing, then goes on to environmentals. And it's at that point that that's what we want to hear. I mean, as we meet and as those tests are done and as those public hearings are held, that's what that commission is going to want to hear, is what's behind that. And yes, here's the data, but here's everything else. That's to me, that's the transparency, that's the openness, and that's the accepting of the opinions and saying, okay, we can't gather all of that right now. There's a lot of it we can't, because frankly, we don't know. There are so many hypotheticals right now that we say, well, it's going to do this, and 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 some of those may well be right, but I don't know at this point, because I don't have those studies.
I would say that's the problem, is that you don't know. I feel like a lot of the
When again, Earth doesn't move until those questions are answered. And so in our end, we haven't permitted, we haven't issued a permit. We're not even close as a MIDA board to that permitting process yet. And at this point, we've got to go through the referendum process and see that out and how that ends before we start down any other road. And there's a lot that still has to happen.
Can I just make a suggestion? I'll be done.
Sure.
I would just say, you so far said you wouldn't go back and change anything. If I could convince you to change something, it would be to take public input and make sure public knows about these meetings before you approve anything. Because it feels like a corporate policy.
Shepard, our throats. And before we take another question here, I'm just going to have Ben, our ecologist here, responding to the importance of the groundwater and the systems here.
Yeah, you quoted Nietzsche, so I'll quote Wendell Berry, one of my favorite writers. And Wendell Berry wrote, "There is no unsacred ground. There's only sacred land and desecrated land." And I think that one of the things that is so beautiful about our community, whatever your personal spiritual beliefs, is that we feel the power of this place. You know, and especially in a world that is becoming more digital and disconnected, being able to actually witness and connect with the land, with the water, is so important. And so one of the messages that I've heard from all the panelists is we need to stay involved. And many people have said, oh, it's a done deal, right? There's no opportunity. And instead, we need really to stay engaged on this. And on the water issue, there has been a claim, I've heard this from several people, that there's no hydrological nexus or connection between those valleys and Great Salt Lake. I've seen no scientific evidence suggesting that's the case. To the contrary, we've seen locomotive springs and many of these springs decrease in flow as water use in those valleys has increased. So again, thinking of burden of proof, it's a part of the watershed. We need to assume that water consumption there, like anywhere else, would impact.
Yeah, let's go.
I just have just a question. I have heard, one of the weird things about being in my job is a lot of people reach out to me, and I'm not really the person they need to talk to. I'm just the person they find. Story of my life. Yeah, right. No, you're. But one of the things that I've heard from folks that there has been some earth moving on the site, and I don't know if that's true or not true, but I would just love. It seems just what you just said suggests that there has not. We haven't started down this road at all. But I've heard, and again, I mean, it could be just somebody moving earth on their property in a way that is conforming to what their land is doing now. I have no idea. I'm speaking out of ignorance here.
Not on our end, not on the developer's end at this point. We're in a holding pattern at this point. We've got a process going that's, again, we respect, and we will see that through. Nothing, again, we haven't given a permit.
And so are you saying that the permitting process won't start until the referendum process is?
The permitting process won't start until everything in that development agreement is done and they've met all of the requirements.
Let's go here in the yellow shirt. That whatever color it is.
So I just want to ask, and I'll try to be very brief. So in other parts of the nation where data centers are going, like in Powell, they have abided by local permitting processes. They've met the requirements, they've gotten permits, they built, and then there were consequences. And I'm just presuming that the law of, everything kind of being even, that pretty much happened everywhere that these centers are going in. What are the remedies at that point? Is it worth the risk? Or what are the remedies of the legal expert, and then is it worth the risk?
So the question there, just to make sure I'm hearing it correctly, is basically like, if the developers fail to meet the agreement that's laid out, or they don't meet water quality standards, air pollution standards, what happens then? Is that basically what you're asking?
If they do the studies, build, and they get approvals, and then walk back. We live in a nation that is pretty standard for major corporations. I mean, look at DuPont and the forever chemicals they were dumping in rivers, right? That they failed to keep their promises.
Yes.
That they're not publicly accountable. What are the remedies for that?
Yeah, maybe you can start right there from a legal perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I should really, I'm the expert here. What I'll say is part of this will depend on what the permit looks like, right? They could have closure agreements, they could have violation agreements, and the ultimate permit is the thing that you ultimately look at. The thing that is odd about this one, though, is when MIDA stepped in, and I realize, 65 miles may include a buffer, but there's still, I had a neighbor once when we were dealing with a project, the developer referred to the project having a buffer, and the neighbor said, well, I'm a buffer to the buffer then. So I'm just right outside of the buffer. And then what happens to me, right? And the strange thing about this is Box Elder County normally would have tried to take into account the broader community interests. And now we're going to focus in on the landowners who all are standing to profit as sort of the stewards of the project. And there isn't anybody outside of that 65 miles who is actually a constituent of MIDA. They've been cut out of the county essentially for a local government purpose. And I think one of the strange things about this one is oftentimes local governments play a very valuable role in trying to bridge the gap between a controversial development and the affected neighbors. And in this particular case, you have basically the town is everybody who stands to profit from the project, and everybody who is going to bear the cost who doesn't stand to profit, they're on the outside. And I think that really is going to require some delicacy if MIDA is going to thread that needle, assuming that we ever get to that point.
And Brett, can you kind of speak to like the actual process there? Like, if they are anything with the air quality.
Yep. So, right, yeah. So there may be some remedies that are within an air permit or a Clean Water Act permit, in which case the state would be the venue no matter what, and that's going to be the same. I'm thinking more about sort of local nuisance issues. So, it might not be that they're operating within their permit, but they're causing a heat island, or they're operating their permit, they're causing an air quality problem, so it's still kind of localized, or they're operating within their permit, and there's sound noise or whatever. I mean, that's more of the, but if it is within if they're violating their permit, I would expect the state to enforce the law rigorously, and if they don't, citizens can bring suit in order to enforce the law themselves.
Let's go here in the blue shirt.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here, especially for the MIDA representative. You're very brave. I have a couple of questions, just a little bit quick
Did you write on my dignity index?
I love it. It's very good. No
I hand that out at every council meeting.
That's
It
no, it
sits
sounds
on my dais for every one of my council members, and it's handed out at the door so that we have those right conversations.
very good. So I worked on this during the enhanced use lease creation. I worked in the public-private partnering office in the command staff building, and I saw it from the beginning. And I understand the reason for it might have came a little bit later because we were having a hard time implementing it to cross Weaver and Davis. So I agree with the gentleman in the back who was talking about how it's benefited. I'm from Weaver County myself. And it was needed at that time to kind of bridge the conflict that we had between counties and how we do this. My first comment is, has MIDA outgrown its purpose? The things that you've done around the base, great. Camp Williams, great. Ski resort, professional. I was also involved in that because we were looking for property on a hill place swap, right? So I get that. We have MWR facilities around the world, and we have a lot of military benefits. But was there another deal we could have done? We don't know. But I feel like MIDA maybe has outgrown their original purpose. They've gotten a little too big. So the first question, that I have a second one, is have we really delineated what the military aspect of this project is, other than throwing up a national security banner? And when we throw up that national security banner, we kind of go into a secret position and we start throwing out terms like fear of China getting ahead of us. We have to remember that we are an open society, and there's a reason we're an open and why we're so strong and competitive, because we have great people who get good ideas. And it is more painful, democracies are messy, but it's gotten us where we are 250 years later. And the third part of that is, are we asking enough of these developers? We don't really know who's going to be using this, and we know it's going to be one of the gazillion billionaires out there. You listen to other cities and counties that have had these projects, and they're asking for the moon. And not just for their county, but for the state. We're struggling with affordable housing, with feeding children, with our public education system. And these are things we can, and they won't give it unless you ask. And it's not just property tax back, as you talk about seniors are being taxed out of their homes right now. There are bigger things we'd be asking for. Aside from the ecological, environmental, and other concerns, this is just more the other side of it. So is MIDA outgrown its britches? Are we hiding behind national security and China as a fear tactic? And are we asking?
Last one, say that again.
And are we,
Repeat the last point.
go ahead.
Well, and are we asking enough?
Are we asking us to?
Are we hiding behind China? Are we asking enough for our communities back?
You're scaring the lemmings off.
Sure. I didn't know if it was for sure a question. Yeah, again, you're asking my personal belief. Has MIDA outgrown itself? I don't believe so. Is MIDA, or is this project hiding behind national security? While there are certainly, there are certainly a military aspect of the facility itself, it's what it does for the rest of the military within the state and the commitments from that income that benefit, that's where the military benefit is. It's what it gives to Hill, it's what it gives to our guard units, our reserve units, and the infrastructure that it builds on their end that they can't build without it. Not being able to go after Milcon in the way that they used to be able to, now this allows things to happen. That's more of a military tie to it than to say, oh, it's tied to national security. Is there a need for it? Yes. And it's interesting. It was interesting for me to have this blow up in the way that it did. And it kills me that it's just gotten to the point where it did. I was traveling, which I've had to do way too much lately, but I was traveling and ended up participating on this board meeting virtually, which was okay, but I finished, and we wrapped up, and vote was cast, and we were done with the meeting, and I went on, and from where I was in Detroit that week, I traveled to Georgia, to Maxwell Air Force Base for War College, and I sat in the middle of we need this, let's have a full day's chat on China, and our situation with them. Let's have a full day's chat about Russia. Let's have a full day's chat about AI and where we sit, and drone technology, and our desperate need for that technology, and the need then for the places to host that technology. And it was eye-opening for me to go, wow, okay, this is amazing. And then I get to my email at night and I have death threats. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got death threats for something that I've just been, from a national standpoint, from the Air Force being told how desperate our situation is from a national security standpoint, for AI, for those things. There's a huge benefit to our military here. Those are the guys that I worry about. Those are the guys that live in my community. Those are the guys that work in my community and throughout the state. I have a commitment to the military itself. I serve on the Civic Leader Program for AFMC, for Material Command, and I get to deal with those guys on a regular basis. And so I look at what does that project do? Is Deer Valley too big? It had its purpose. From an economic development standpoint, not military standpoint, but from an economic development standpoint that affects the military, it's huge. And the size of it will greatly benefit the Airmen at Hill. We know what those numbers look like. That will greatly affect Hill. Every one of those projects, in one way or another, is doing those same things. If there is a way in my mind to do more of that, that doesn't mean data centers, but development as a whole that has an effect on our military, then yes, I think MIDA has a continued purpose. If we're done taking care of the military and don't need those things any longer, that's, to me, is when that stops.
Yeah, Berg, you want to
Yeah,
speak?
just one thing. I would just say my biggest occupational hazard as a professor is someone's going to Zoom bomb me. So the fact that you were standing here in front of this group after, it just shows some gumption. So I appreciate you being here. The thing I will say that there were really two different factors that I think that caused this problem. And one was the idea that China was going to get ahead of us at AI was paired with, almost in the same day, maybe not in the same press release, but the project proponent claiming that everyone that was opposed to it was a paid protester by China. And I will say, I'm looking for my check still. I feel very wrong. China hasn't given me anything yet. And I think that's true across the board. The second thing that I think is, laying out the case ahead of time and allowing people to make their own assessments. A big part of this is just the fact that MIDA meeting happened, and then my understanding of the process is that later that night is when Box Elder County met for the first time, put it off for a week, and then voted without any public comment. Is that wrong? Box Elder County met twice beforehand.
They did.
Oh.
Without notice that was meaningful, the notice didn't really.
Yeah, I find that out. Then how come only landowners were at that first meeting?
Yeah, that's it.
Why was that?
Not a public notice.
Yeah, you were there because you knew about it. You knew about it, didn't you? None of us knew about it. I wonder why that was.
It was advertised.
That's not public notice, man.
Yeah.
Where? It was in the paper. It was advertised.
We had no notice of any of this ahead. You did though, so you go ahead and agree. Because you were an interested party. Apparently you were.
I stepped out of order.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. One thing that Mr. Shepard said was that roads bring industry or something like that. Well, that land out there, Hansel Valley, is the perfect winter range for cattle. Those farmers most of the time don't have to grow any alfalfa. And most of the ranchers are under attack for growing alfalfa because it takes so much water. And where we have perfect land, we don't need roads for it to have industry. We have good industry. Now, Elise Nelson, who has 3 degrees, wrote in the Utah News Dispatch. I don't know if any of you know Elise Nelson, but she wrote that these data centers are going to become obsolete because there's something coming called e-computing, where we're not going to take this information and send it to these data centers anymore. They're going to stay right where the computing happens. And this is coming. So that data center is likely to become obsolete before it's even finished. Ben, what do you say about that?
I really do share the concern. Like, look, the threats from AI are real. The threats of bad actors outside and within the U.S. are real, right? And there's a project that many people have brought up, the Mythos project that came through a few months ago, right, that identified thousands of day zero threats in operating systems, right, that would allow a foreign power to take advantage, steal data, and manipulate things. So those are real threats. But I appreciate this question because the question we should be asking is, does this kind of development reduce those threats? And talking to AI experts and energy experts, their conclusion is probably not, and that we are experiencing an investment boom. And part of why there has been so much urgency, I can't speak to whether that was behind this project or not, but nationwide, we see so many applications going in for this because it looks like many investors are trying to cash out before that bubble pops. When instead, the Mythos project made the leap forward, not because we had the biggest data centers, but because we had the best software engineers designing this approach, right? And to get back to this comment from the woman saying, the American way, right? We are an open society. I think that that's really interesting. We aren't going to beat China by playing by their rules, right? By forcing these down the throats of different communities. Instead, we're going to be open. There'll be public-private partnerships. There'll be innovation. And so that's the question that we should be asking. Is this going to actually enhance national security or not? And I completely understand that there are people of good faith who disagree and would say, no, we absolutely are constrained by compute. We need to build out as fast as we can. My assessment is that that's not the case.
Let's go in the back in the blue shirt.
Yes, I'd really like to address the issue regarding heat from the system. It runs at 9 gigawatts. But in order to create 9 gigawatts, you've got to burn methane to get the 9 gigawatts. That comes to a total of 18 gigawatts being used in that valley. So the numbers that Rod Davis has presented are, for the most part, correct. And if anyone disagrees with me, come talk to me. Because if you disagree with that, we might be off by a couple gigawatts. But 18 gigawatts is a hell of an amount of energy. And they say, oh, we're going to save water by using a different cooling source. Guess what? That cooling source creates more heat. This is ridiculous. This is way too much carbon dioxide being dumped into our atmosphere, way too much heat being dumped into this valley. This is ridiculous that we're looking at 18 gigawatts of energy. And yes, the 24 or 23 nuclear bombs per day is a correct number.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. I want to be clear. I wasn't questioning Rob's analysis. And one of the points that he brought up that you've reiterated is it isn't just the consumption of the electricity, it's any of the inefficiencies in producing that electricity as well.
Yes,
so
it's all added in, and it's all heat, and it's all heat in that one area. And it doesn't go anywhere.
And that
so when UPNL creates our power, it spreads it out across the whole state. This does not get spread. It's all right there at that one single point.
And to that point, I think it's really important. I appreciated when President Adams, for example, said, hey, let's scale back the physical footprint. But what's more important than that is the scope of the electricity production and the server compute power. Because that's a thermodynamic reality you can't get around. And so you're right to point out, you either put that into the evaporation of water, and the heat is taken up by that heat of evaporation, or you release it to the atmosphere, and that's where you can have very substantial environmental impacts with the heat.
Or you heat sink it into the aquifer.
And then we have a situation where we created the world's biggest bubbling hot spring, right? It's great stuff.
There you go, all the hot springs get hotter for free.
And I want to hear your question, so I think we'll take one more question. Let's go right here in the front, the gray shirt.
So there, I think MIDA has run amok, and I think it's not a good thing. But I want to ask about other topics and other issues that we already know. There's problems with water, air pollution, carbon, heat, scorching, global warming, all these things, but we haven't really talked about other problems. And one of them is that there's a lot of toxic waste that gets created by data centers. Every 2 or 3 years, all the CPUs need to be swapped out. That is all sorts of toxic waste. So there's an enormous problem of toxic waste that hasn't been considered. In addition, there isn't enough natural gas to power this thing. There's natural thinking about how much power is available in Wyoming, and that's not available. I think there is a fictional military connection. The military plant is 43 miles away, and as best I can tell, it was only added on May 4th after many public maps were released without that military land being included. But I guess the one thing I want to talk about the most is my specialty. I'm a retired geology professor. I worked out in Kansas Valley. That area has 3 active normal faults, all of which could produce major catastrophic big earthquakes that could destroy all of the infrastructure, blow up the power plant potentially, bad things could happen. These active normal faults are somewhat unusual, not that unusual, somewhat unusual, but they are spread across as much as 5 miles. They are under or near the site, and every 200 feet or so there is a fault underneath the site, some of which may be active, some of which are not, and many of them are active. And so it would be very, very hard to safely put a power plant with explosive materials in it and a data center across the site that has all of these active structures underneath. In addition, there's a lot of liquefaction that has occurred there, and the western site is dominated by one of the largest active volcanoes that we have in the state of Utah. So the geologic hazards have not been considered either, and I'm wondering whether Ben or some of the other panelists who haven't had a chance to talk as much know of other risks and issues that we haven't discussed yet. I bet there are others that you know of that aren't on our list yet. You know, toxic waste, all the hazards, liquefaction, blah, blah, you know, there's all these issues. What else have you not considered?
Do you want to speak on that?
Other potential. No reports,
There are a lot of there are a lot of other potential risks we've talked about. And I think you and I talked about drawing the water out and causing an earthquake just from drawing the water out and causing the inequity.
Changes in water pressure do cause earthquakes.
Yeah.
Usually by increasing, but it also happens when there's less water pressure.
Yeah, that was a major concern, especially if you look at the Kansas Valley studies from, when were the studies, the 1936, 34? Anyway, those are very interesting studies. That is a concern. One other thing I did mention that no matter what we do, the water, there's going to be contamination. There's going to be air contamination, land contamination, water contamination. We're right on the fault line. That is an issue. The one thing I don't think we've understood or talked about enough is that if we do change this and make that an industrial area, we've lost what we have out there. It's pristine, it's austere, but it is sacred land. And we can't get that back. We take that away and play these games, we'll never get that back. And we may never get our safety back, or our health, or anything else we're giving away.
And I don't disagree with you. I share the concerns if they, as they come up. Again, I think a lot of that is to still, that as they do their geological tests, as they move forward, those are things that will come up.
It should have been done before this was even brought up.
But again,
They've done to protect us all.
but again, they're not, there's no permit issue, there's no ground being turned, because those tests haven't been done yet. So
Why we bypass EPA checks?
we haven't.
In preemptive before. We've gone through all the same EPA checks we do done for any other development. I don't think so. Because this is national security, China.
Because they still have to be done. Again, we're still early in the process, but
Should have been done before approval.
Yeah, that's for sure. Where's the studies?
I think we want to just keep the question here focused. And I will say, right, as Brig mentioned, right, with a lot of these, right, this is kind of a pre-approval, right? We have additional opportunities for public comment in air quality permitting, water availability, water quality, all those things. But that's not to say that maybe we should have had more information on the front end.
How's that going to affect us?
Well, I wanted to speak just really briefly to this idea of what is the power source, because this affects so much, right? We're talking about air quality, water consumption, also economics. 93% of all new power built in the United States last year was solar and wind nationwide. And that's because those technologies are economically dominant, right? They're outperforming and undercutting anything else. And so one of the other red flags that I had about this project was, why are we permitting and committing to natural gas as an energy source? And people have said, oh, well, down the road we'll switch. All that does is increase the cost of operations. And so speaking about obsolescence, how is this data center going to compete if it's using more expensive and more polluting energy moving down the road? But I appreciate all of you being here and expressing, including the hard feelings that we have. Just a few years ago, I was sued for $3 million over the Utah Lake Islands project. I don't know if any of you heard about that. We wanted to build the world's largest islands in Utah Lake. And that put me through just a crazy roller coaster, right? Personally, me and my family. And today, looking back, I am grateful for that experience. And I actually think that our community in Utah Valley pulled together in a way that we hadn't before. And we had environmentalists and people that hated the new woke Utah flag standing arm in arm, working together to get answers to questions and to say, this is our community and we have a say all along. And so my invitation, I just want to reiterate, please stay involved, please stay engaged, and let's not get cynical. The biggest myth is that your voice doesn't matter and your vote doesn't matter. And what has already changed in this project, including what Kevin O'Leary is saying about it, proves that's not the case. That actually we have a huge influence to determine the outcome of this. The fact that we can come together, people with very different views, sit here, speak respectfully. And one outcome that I'd love to see is, imagine if somebody like Brenna were appointed to be that community representative, to ensure that as the project is evaluated, as we're going to say, hey, are we meeting these standards? Somebody's able to say, hey, I've got questions about that. Right? And that becomes more likely the more that we're involved constructively. And I appreciate tonight there were no threats, no shouts. This really brings me a lot of hope. So just my personal thanks to all of you for the investment of time and trust.
Let me just wrap up echoing that. First of all, thanks for having me. Jake, he brought me here on a whole different thing. He lied to me. He told me I was going to come talk about housing. I've worked for the last almost 2 years to get that housing bill passed in D.C. and spent 7 more times a year out there lobbying to get housing going. And then it's this. Seriously? Thank you, though, for allowing me to be here. And thank you for your voices. Again, as a mayor, it means that that's important to me. Transparency, your voices mean everything. And so thank you for allowing me to come be here and not completely yelling at me while I'm here.
Maybe to pass along, Brenna and Greg, you have any closing thoughts?
Go ahead, Brenna. You can close. I don't have any closing thoughts. Do you want to say something?
I don't. I said just a minute ago.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just end by, thank you all for being here and choosing to spend this time and engage in these hard conversations. It's what it's all about.